some similarities as between what happened in the theater and what happened to Joe. The firefighters that were working in the theater, it appears as though they felt pretty confident that they were safe where they were, and they had this fire well under control. In the case of Joe's fire, it is similar in that a 2.5-story wood frame, of which there are many, many thousands of them in the Northeast. To get to the top floor, there's only one stairway, and that's the stairway that's in the rear. And what Joe referenced is that he, with other firefighters, went up those stairs to the top floor, and when they went in that top floor area, the atmosphere was nothing to get really concerned about. Obviously, there was a fire in the house. They were sent to the top floor to investigate to see if the fire had extended to the top floor. And as Joe said a few minutes ago, it was very tenable on that top floor. Nothing to get concerned about.
Chief, hold that thought for 1 second. Captain LaCouture, you mentioned getting separated from your crew, but that the environment was tenable. Did you ever find out why that happened?
No, I'm not sure why. But I know when I got to the top floor, there was another fire. The other office was there. He grabbed me. He says, "Come on, we got to go to the front of the room. We got to get the ceiling down."
Never found out.
I never found out.
All right, Chief, as you were saying.
All right. So anyway, let's get back to the situation where here we have firefighters on the top floor. Joe's the nozzle guy, and the officer is with him. Everything looks like it's pretty good, and the officer makes a decision. I think we should probably pierce this ceiling to see if we have any fire up above us. At that point, they needed to get a hook to open the ceiling, so the officer turned to get a hook when the fire that was burning in the knee walls, which is the short wall on either side of the room, was burning in that knee wall and was also burning in the ceiling area above them. So what Joe didn't realize is that there was fire all around him. And in that type of building, that can happen without the person that's in the living area knowing that there's fire left and right and above. So the fire officer made the decision, we need to pierce the ceiling to check to see if we have any fire up above us. So when he went to get the hook, the fire apparently had burned the wooden laths to the point where the fire built up pressure. It couldn't relieve itself, and the path of least resistance was the burned laths above Joe's head, and the ceiling collapsed down on top of Joe. At that point, the fire ventilated itself. It's like a tiger in a cage that wants to get out. And the ceiling coming down is like opening the door of the cage, and down came the fire. And it came down right on top of Joe. Now, Joe is trapped with fire between where he is and the back door that he came up. So the only way he could get out was through the front window. And he made the decision that he was going to go for that front window. A firefighter that was in the position that Joe was in is going to make every effort not to burn up. So you're going to do whatever you can to get out of this atmosphere. So his thought was, I'm getting out of here and I'm going out that window. And fortunately, when he went out the window, the aerial ladder was at the window. He was able to get to the aerial ladder and a roof area where he could step aside. You're going to see in these pictures that you have, Joe actually coming out the window with fire all around him. And once Joe is out onto the roof, that entire window is filled with fire coming out. So the parallel that we're trying to draw here between what happened in the theater is the fire was burning undetected, and the tiger coming out of the cage was the failure of the roof structure. In Joe's case, the fire was burning all around him and above him. It was building up pressure, and it was looking for a way to vent itself. And the only way it found the ventilation was to come down through the ceiling. Today, you will notice that the aerial ladder very often will go right to the top of the roof, what we call the peak or the ridgepole. And you'll see firefighters going up there with a saw to cut a hole in the roof. And to the average person, they have no idea, why is this guy cutting a hole in the roof? And the whole purpose of cutting that hole is to open the cage to let the tiger out. So if there's any fire like what Joe had above him, instead of the fire venting down, the fire is going to ventilate out the hole that the firefighters make.
Do you think the guys at the Strand could have done that?
Don't know. Somebody made the decision to attempt that, because when you talk to Sonny Burrell, the retired chief, he was on ladder 2, and they were told to get to the roof of the theater. In order to get to the roof of the theater, they had to get a ladder to go from the roof of the building adjacent to it, which was higher than the roof of the theater, and it would appear that they were going to go down onto that roof, most likely to vent that roof. And the only reason they survived was the fact that they had to go back and get the ladder to get on the roof. So if you want to draw some parallels, even in 1941, knowing that that fire perhaps was burning in the cockloft, and the way to let it out is to vent the roof, it's very similar to what we do today, to put a hole in the roof to let the fire out so that what happened to Joe won't happen again. So I guess the whole purpose of what we're talking about here is almost like a lessons learned, which we'll get into.
Right. Yeah.
But I think anybody that listens to this or watches this has to understand why firefighters put holes in roofs.